right, live from Del Boca Vista.
From Del Boca Vista via Beloit via Overland Park, Kansas. It is a cool, brisk, sunshiny day. It is it is March the 7th, the year 2023. Welcome aboard, everybody. You listen to the Crushing Iron podcast, and this is episode 664.
Yes, it is.
664. Did you happen to get any of the unseasonably warm weather the last few days?
Does that mean mid-40s?
Yeah, for you guys, that's mid-40s, because I had a lot of people riding their bikes outside in freaking.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
definitely.
It was nuts.
Definitely. Yeah, they were getting out. We didn't, it was nice, but I wasn't, I'm not in cold bike riding mode yet. Mm-hmm. Maybe next winter.
Yeah. Seriously, you got to get acclimated to. And we've had a fairly mild winter compared to what I was like preparing myself for. So I will take it. We are still inching closer to spring and outside weather all the time. We got more daylight hours, which is awesome. The sun's staying out later. We're getting more sunshine in the morning, which means all good things. And as race season is upon us, it's an exciting time. It's my favorite month, one of my favorite months of the year, because it is the month before the chaos begins with, I think, Oceanside, Texas 70.3 start off the month. You got Clash, Miami this weekend, for those of you Clash fans. But yeah, it's exciting stuff. We're excited to be here. If it's your first time tuning in, welcome. We appreciate you giving us your time. We know you have quite a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general. Channel very valuable, so we appreciate you tuning in today. We cover it all. We do swim, bike, and run specific podcasts. We do race recaps and also a lot of race previews. But for the most part, Mike and I, as coaches, athletes, best friends, we just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through in life, not just as human beings, but also as coaches and athletes ourselves. We also talk a lot about what our own athletes are going through. Mike and I work with a wide range of athletes all across the globe, from beginner level triathletes looking at their very first 5K or sprint triathlon, all the way up through elite amateurs trying to get back to world championships, and everyone in between from all over the globe. And we'll use the feedback loop we have with them and training peaks, emails, text messages, and the like to drive the discussion of the day. And we also frequently utilize our Facebook group. You can search that, Crushing Iron Group. Answer one simple question. We'll let you right in. Great people, awesome community, fantastic resource. It is a very, very supportive, willing community with a wide range of athletes that have been around the block. They've seen it all. They've done it all. They've made the mistakes. They've won races. They've been to Kona. They've done their first try. They've been there. So in a sport that is oftentimes insanely confusing and way overdone, it's a solid group that's there to support you. And we'll do a Q&A in there at least once a month. Take the pulse of the community, get as many questions as we can. But that's it. We don't do sponsors. We do not do ads, but we do have an agenda, and that's to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
All right. I got a question for you. When you say mild winter,
questions for me today.
I know. You say we had a mild winter. Do you think it really was mild, or you just don't think it was as bad as like your perception of it going into it? Because that's sort of where I'm at.
I think it was both.
Okay.
Because multiple people have been like, this was a mild winter. Because I keep thinking, like, I'm going through that phase of like, is it over? Did that happen? Because it wasn't that bad. I mean, it really wasn't that bad. We didn't get near as much snow as before, but the coldest day was like the coldest week everybody had, where it was like this winter storm that blew across America, whatever, around Christmas. It was negative 15 in Nashville. It was also negative like 15. It was colder in Nashville than it was in Kansas. So it has been fairly mild. There hasn't been a day this winter where I was like, I'm not running outside because it's too cold.
Yeah.
Well, we're outside, period, no matter what. So I do think we avoided some of the traditional, because I've got athletes here and they've always, like, every winter it's either a ton of snow or ice, or it's cold, but it's also like 30-mile-an-hour winds, and it's just like deflating. So I don't know if I I think it's both. I pumped myself way up to be able to be resilient and withstand the onslaught of the winter. and it really wasn't. And I think I've gotten a little, I like the cold. I like running in the cold. I think Hayden playing hockey has helped because like I'd be out there standing out around at nighttime in 20-degree weather, walking and watch him play outside. You go watch him inside. It's still cold. So I think I just kind of lowered my barrier. But then I know what's going to happen. As soon as it turns to like 60, I'm going to feel like I'm dying because I'm going to be like, oh, I'm having like a heat stroke. It's so hot. I'm not prepared for this. So I think it's been mild. But I think I just kind of set myself up to make it maybe a little bit worse than it actually was.
Well, you're getting tough, man. I think you're getting tough.
I mean, I wouldn't go that far, but yeah, sure. I'll roll with it.
I just think it's funny because it's not like winter comes every year. It's not like it's new and everybody like seems to act surprised, whoa, it's cold. I can't believe it's cold. Yeah. Well, that's what happens. So you got to get out and I don't know. Hey, should we address Del Boca Vista?
No.
Okay.
If you don't know what Del Boca Vista is, then you should watch Seinfeld. And if you haven't watched Seinfeld, and you start, your life will be better for it. So
I got the impression people think I was lying. We're lying about that.
Nah,
like I have my own Del Boca Vista here.
Yeah, it's legit. Everybody has their own. The point is to with someone like yourself, you know how famous people, they check into a hotel and they don't give their real name.
That's
right.
True.
They give like I'm Timothy, Timothy John Smith, and like, all right, you put you on the, you've got the whole 10th floor there, Tim, in the penthouse suite, and it's it's freaking Puff Daddy. That's how they do things.
Yeah.
You're the same way. Yeah. You've got to protect, with kind of like a level of anonymity, your prestige and your fame, and so you can't be giving away where you train, because then you're going to have paparazzi at the door. You're going to have Triathlete Magazine. Yeah. You might have, Triathlon Taryn waiting by your car to do, a quick interview. Like you never know, right? With your level of status. I mean, I don't blame you. Last thing I'd want to do is have my safe place, the place where I go to train and get away from life. Next you walk out and, you're going to have the lights, camera, action, and that's just not fair.
Well, I do always wait 24 hours before I post on the gram to make sure I'm not there anymore.
Man, to have your status, I don't know how you stay tough with the status that you have, which is technically do you have more questions for me? Because you've been grilling me since we got on our call about an hour ago. You got any more questions for me before we launch on the topic for the day?
Let me see. No, I think we're good, man. I think we can go right into the topic of the day.
Good. And as usual, we're pretty much on the same page. I thought about this earlier, is reading through Training Peaks and having some conversations with athletes on the phone, and a few things kind of come to mind with me this time of year. Is one, I think people start to get a little more excited about springtime and racing, but this is also, and we touch on this, I think, around the same time every year, is how the fall and the winter, the holidays, it just kind of beats people up from a mental and emotional space. And when you look at how little and infrequent people have begun to race throughout the last 2 to 3 years, I think people got accustomed to not racing in 2020 and 2021, and it kind of became the new norm. And then I think, there's other reasons, maybe fiscally, responsible athletes, maybe not choosing to race as much, that I do believe, and I see this as a coach, and I know this for myself personally as an athlete, is that I believe we have begun to limit our opportunities to be competitive and to find out the level of competitiveness that we want to have, not just in training, but in our day-to-day life. We take insanely protective measures. We retreat. We look to minimize risk at every corner. We look to protect ourselves mentally, emotionally, physically from anything that may or may not happen. We assume the worst. We don't want to race unless we're in the best shape possible. A 5K is too short. It's not good enough for us to push ourselves in. So you might race once or twice a year, right? And then I generally feel this, and I've seen this in myself as well the last 3 or 4 years, like specifically with the way certain athletes will train or not train, is you never really put yourself in a situation where you have to fight, right? And we've touched on this, I think, a few podcasts ago, is about how you have to be mentally and emotionally with it to put up fight, right? To force your body to move physically. because it's usually the mind that goes before the body. You can always kind of make it happen. The human body is capable of insanely incredible things if you tell it to do so, right? But you have to have the energy and the drive to do so. And athletes struggle a lot with, feeling down, and they consider it not being quote unquote motivated. But as I told an athlete on the phone yesterday, I was like, it's not you're not a motivated individual. It's that right now you're just drained. You're just sucked dry mentally and emotionally. So you don't have that fight. You don't have that in you to do that. And you have to have it. But, going back to workouts where we're always afraid. I think it was there before 2020, that the protective mechanism that we kind of, or the governor that we've put on ourselves. It used to be like 80, and now I feel like it's like 40 miles an hour. And I think, again, 2020 just threw gasoline on the fire of so many things and insecurities and fears and the inability to take a risk and to take a leap. And I think we've lost that. And I think there are huge parallels between training and racing and the benefits you get from taking risks and pushing yourself and challenging yourself, and how that corresponds and translates to how you present and how you attack life, right? Are you a person that's easily retreats? Are you a person that easily, and then I've had this conversation multiple times with multiple athletes this last few weeks, for a variety of reasons, is I just say strictly get your ass, if you've got kids around, close your ears, but get your ass out of the fucking house.
Yeah.
And move. I don't care what it is. I don't care if you just walk for 30 minutes, but get out of your house and walk. I don't care how, what you're thinking, but you can walk. Unless you're deathly ill and you've succumbed to some major illness, you can get out and walk. Because while we've become insanely protective of how we are doing physically, which I totally understand, everyone wants to protect their health and what it takes to get back to training and to feel better. The most often found remedy for that is to do nothing. And I've seen this over and over and over with athletes and with friends, and honestly with family the past few years, as depression rates have increased, anxiety levels are insanely high, is that everything we do or that we're told to recuperate or to re-energize ourselves is not actually doing anything to re-energize anything. It's just we are told to sit and be still and to do nothing. And while that may or may not speed up your recovery from training or from the illness that you're suffering, right, is, or because, and not just from colds or viruses or things like that, it's also with the smallest little niggle in my knee. I need to take a few days off, right? Or maybe just go for a walk or hop in elliptical or go swim. The answer is very, very, very rarely do nothing, because while you might feel like it speeds up the process of getting better, quote unquote, physically or remedying whatever issue it has, the lasting effects of what I believe it does for you mentally and emotionally by putting yourself in a rut where doing nothing is the answer, you're more than likely to stay in that place. And I just think that it's become very hard and also very obvious, again, from a coaching perspective, when the amount of athletes that we work with and how we see things on a day-to-day basis, that we have lost I think our competitive spirit. And that is why also I think racing has become harder for a large part of athletes out there, is because we have our threshold of competitive nature has been lowered because we don't challenge ourselves anymore. If we do, we do it in a controlled environment inside, right? We don't do it outside. We don't take risks. We don't do things to challenge ourselves. And so I think it's a great topic. Now that I've talked about it for 25 minutes, but it's something that I am very passionate about, because I do believe it's also a piece that is very important to the mental and emotional health of every athlete and every person out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I got into, so I grew up playing like you, a lot of competitive team sport type stuff. And then I lost that for a long time, and I started losing my way and everything like that. And then I got into endurance sports. I started with, the 5K and that whole 9 yards. And I was never around that atmosphere. And the one thing I noticed was, and it was really I really loved it at the time, and I still do, is this idea that, when I used to when we played, college sports and all the way through and everything, competition was it. Like, it was really competitive. Dudes would always be coming at you and trying to get your position or whatever the case may be. And, the teams you're playing, they just want to step on your head, and just beat you into the ground. So that just was a real natural thing for me growing up. And, while I don't think that, that's still around, but I think the overtone is that, that's not really a good thing. And I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that, but the reality is when I got into endurance sports, it wasn't like that. People were real supportive. You know what I mean? Like, people didn't care if you beat them, but they were just happy to be out there and doing stuff. And I think that that's at the crux of endurance sports, which is a good thing. But what we forget along the way is that competitive drive that, kind of gets us to where we're at is it should be internal, right? So it should be our own competitive drive to be the best we can, and I think that all sort of gets lost in translation because we start thinking about our race times and, and worrying about, things that aren't really that important. It's just about being better and getting out, like you're saying, and getting into the world and doing things and pushing just to do different stuff that makes you a better, more well-rounded person. Now, for example, I've talked about it. When I played college baseball, I played shortstop, and when I was afraid every time I went on that field, first of all, I was a good infielder, but it was just really hard for me. I always had to really, it was like stepping into the fire in a lot of ways because, you're so isolated and you have if you make an error, it kind of, it's on you. They just scored a run because you just screwed up. And not only that, but, a baseball coming at you 95, 100 miles an hour can knock your block out, So there's a lot of things like that. And that kind of thing in my core is what always drove me early in this sport. And I was always, I almost embraced it, like the idea of, you'll hear it a lot too, is I was on a run. I don't know, something started going on with my quad today. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's just running a lot of times. It'd be great if we could go out every day and run and not feel any pain. But I think running is just a painful exercise most of the time on some level. It shouldn't be an injury pain, but there's going to be tweaks and niggles and things like that. And the further you get removed from sort of that competitive spirit or that tenacity, the more that stuff really kind of is accented in your brain. And you said it, your body usually gives out way after your brain. You start thinking, you don't need to put yourself through this and that. But I think there's a level of competitive fire that you have to have about yourself, to get through certain workouts or whatever. And then obviously when you get to the race, the contest, the triathlon contest, you you have to, I always, my biggest thing is are you ready to dig deep? Because that's what it is. And if you haven't explored that in training, if you haven't figured out ways to get through it on a daily basis, you're probably not going to do that great when it comes down to the race because it's going to be amplified, times 10. And if you're not ready for that, if you're not ready to go places that may be very uncomfortable, it's going to be a struggle. So, competition can be looked at in many different ways. But I do think that there's, it's sort of like we got to stoke our own fire for it and figure out ways to do it because, especially if you're training indoors on the trainer, running on a treadmill, I'm always kind of, and I think you've talked about this, you kind of play little games with it, and challenge yourself while you're going through there. And it's just those little mental games that can not only make you better, but I think make you happier because if you're just going to spin for 3 hours without changing cadence or anything, that can really kind of just be like, what the hell am I doing? It's a different kind of mental toughness for sure, but kind of figure out ways to challenge yourself and be competitive, even if it's just like, I'm going to keep my I am going to keep my cadence here, and it's going to suck, but that's a good challenge for it, or competitive fire to light in yourself. And the more we just kind of go through the motion, it's just hard to go through the motions, I think, when you're in training and be like, well, I don't know, I guess this will pay off in the end. But it should be every single day you can find something in what you're doing that kind of fires you up a little bit. Not too much, but it just sort of drives you.
It comes down to being calculated with your decisions. And if because I agree, like when you're down mentally and you're down emotionally and you're running with just like very, very few, mental and emotional credits, if you will, to spend on a workout, because you spend those credits on a workout no matter what. So if you're running low on credits, then yeah, you can't expect too much, right, out of a workout. I mean, and you shouldn't, and you gotta buffer that. But when you do feel good and you have it, don't take the easy way. Take the way that gives you the feather in your cap, right, for the rough day that'll come. And if you're feeling great and you're feeling awesome, you're mentally and emotionally energized and life is good, stop taking the pancake flat route every time. Stop hopping on Zwift every time. Stop taking the easy route, that's mostly downhill, or stop, making the swim easy every time. Stop. Because all you're doing is lowering your threshold of competitive nature and fight and risk. People hear risk and think it's like some really bad term. Oh, well, you shouldn't. I'm very risk averse, which is fine. But at some point, you have to take risks to learn things and to challenge yourself, or you're going to die a very slow, boring life, because you're living no matter what. You're alive. That's how you live is the choice that you're making. So when you have those days, do it. Like I had a similar conversation with myself this morning. I was going to go out and I was going to run for anywhere between 50 minutes and an hour. And I was going to do about 30, 35 minutes of just kind of zone 3 tempo work, which is my least favorite because it's just annoying. Right? It's sustainable. So you really don't have an excuse to stop. It's just an annoying, concentrated amount of time. So I walk out the door, right before I walk out the door, I look at the weather app. Feels like 24, winds 20 to 30 mile an hour. I'm like, fucking fantastic. I'm like, great. Yeah. This is just what I wanted. Right, for that mild winter that we were talking about in the earlier part of the podcast. So I usually run on the Greenway. Of course, I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to hit a headwind at one point. When do I want it? Do I want it late? Do I want it early? And I'm warming up and I'm thinking, all right, I could go this way and take it on early. I could go this way. And honestly, my first thought was, all right, well, let's hop on the path here and then we'll just go with the tailwind as far as we can go and then come back. And then I might run a little bit longer, but I'll have most of it with the tailwind. And then I'll come back home around 55 minutes. That was my first thought. And then my second thought was just toughen the fuck up and do it the right way. So I take a left, I warm up flat, and then I take this long incline of a hill into the wind for the first 15 minutes. Awesome. And then turn. And I did it, but I knew my pace was going to be slower, and it was the slowest split that I had. But I wanted to do it because I wanted to set the tone for the workout. And you know what happened?
What?
The rest of the workout felt easier.
Yeah. Because
I did the hardest thing first, right? And I did the hardest thing first, but if I chosen not to do that, when I did it at the very end, because I had to come back with a headwind, my last mile, which was my fastest mile. So my first mile up the incline tempo was like 7:48. My fifth mile of it, so after I've done 4 miles already at tempo, my fifth mile into the wind, fatigued, was like 7:29, 7:30. And I actually felt better. But I only felt better because my level at the beginning, my effort had been raised. Heart rate was a little bit higher. Effort was higher to keep the same pace, same effort. So I generally think I got stronger by raising my level of what felt hard. And then the rest of the run, I was like, this doesn't feel as bad. And I was going faster. And whether that worked or not, or, physically, it worked for me mentally because what I saw was faster paces with what felt like less effort. And that gave me confidence, right? It wasn't going for the bailout the first part of the run and going for the tailwind and just kind of cruising and then having a little bit of fight left and then seeing my pace drop and then getting discouraged. You know what? I'll just call it here, which is what we do. But I only did that because I felt really good today. If I hadn't have felt good, honestly, I probably would have been like, I'll just do 45 minutes easy, flop workouts and do the hard one tomorrow when I feel more energized. Right. And to put myself in a better spot. So I think you have to be picking. And a lot of athletes do a good job of picking and choosing, whether they have it mentally or physically, or they don't have it, emotionally to do certain things. But the point is, when you got it, you got to go for it. You can't walk away. You can't take the easy way out. You can't shelter in place with your training and hide from what life's going to throw at you. Right. And if you want to practice overcoming adversity, if you want to practice taking a risk, if you want to practice going for broke, right? If you want to practice digging deeper than ever before, then practice it under your best case scenario, right? You got good sleep, you're feeling pretty good, go for it, right? Because even if it goes poorly, your level of ability to bounce back from it, because you are feeling more fresh, or you are feeling more mentally, emotionally, or it doesn't go well, you're going to have the credits, right, to fight it. You're going to have credits to spend. Don't do it when it's empty, which is honestly when people go after it the most, is when they're running low.
To
right?
prove something to themselves.
Exactly. You're looking to prove that you still got it, or you're looking to show life, right? I got this frustrating conversation with my spouse or my boss or my coworker, or I got a demotion, or I got passed over for this, or, local government's doing this. I'm going to go out and I'm going to bury myself. And it might feel good for about, 2 seconds, then you're toast for like 4 days. And that's what people do. They do have that show me or show them, or I try to get it out of my system day. I'm like, don't. Because then what does it do to you? You just beats you up even further. Right? It's like putting the guy that just got knocked out in the boxing ring, instead of walking him out of the arena, you put him right back in the ring. That's not going to do anybody any good. That's just going to make you feel worse. Right? And we have become a species that is obsessed with doing things worse for ourselves, adding more stress, adding more responsibilities, going into more debt, succumbing to more social media pressures, or looking at the news too much. I'm like, all choices. Legit, all choices for most people all the time.
Yeah.
And then we wonder why our barrier or our threshold for fighting through things and taking risks, we just kind of like coddle in a corner. Like it's time to get up and to figure out ways to be, to get back. It's time to get back into fighting shape. Period. And there's so many parallels to triathlon training and the life and how they cross over. And if you're motivated in training and you're clicking on all cylinders, you're not giving up and you're finding the right, that transfers to life, right? You have a bad day at work, or your boss, you're like, that's not going to get me down. I'm going to keep pushing forward. I got this. And same goes both ways. If you're not feeling it and you're not energized and you're just kind of taking the easy and the weak way out, it goes both ways. So you got to find ways. I mean, you're going to get knocked down. Doesn't matter. Everybody gets knocked down. Everybody gets knocked down. And it's all relative. And you and I both hear this on a daily basis from athletes about the very, very hard challenges they're going through, and how, then we always kind of say, well, I know it's not as bad as other people, but it's all relative to your own life, right? But there's a difference in getting knocked down and getting back up, and getting knocked down and staying down and wailing, right? Get back up. Get back up. Because you're not showing other people you get back up quick. You're showing yourself. And the most important person you can show or show up for is you. Not anybody else, not your parents, not your friends, not anybody else. The best person you can show up for each and every day is you.
Yeah.
You don't show up, you're showing yourself that it's not worth it. I'm not really going to fight for this. I'm just fine. It'll be fine. Or you turn to the blame game, right? And you just have to put yourself in a situation when you feel good and you're feeling spicy and you're feeling froggy. Push yourself. Take a risk. Your mind will benefit from it, and it will go back to that experience in the future when you're not feeling it, or you feel like you can't, you'll be able to go back on that experience and use it for positive fuel.
My disdain for the news is well documented on this podcast. And I'm bringing it up because you mentioned it earlier, and I assume that you didn't wake up whenever that was and run up the hill into the wind after poisoning yourself with an hour of local shootings and car wrecks and whatever the deal may be.
I did not.
But here's the thing is, like, I get so fired up about this because we have unlimited potential. I'm telling everybody out there, none of you and none of us have reached our potential. And if we continue to put in poison in our brain and that gives us doubt, that makes you think, oh shit, there was a shooting there last week, I better not run around that neighborhood or go down to this place because, whatever. It's just creating doubt. Constant doubt pours into your brain every day. And it's just like taking away our strength in some manner. And I think that, a lot of, social media, and I've fought this because I go, sort of onto maybe like a Twitter or something to get information and find stuff that I want to find, but it's impossible because you find the stuff you want, but you also get inundated with crap that takes you down rabbit holes and then makes you be like, what's the point? What's the hope? And it's never been more prevalent. I mean, it's really, really exploded, obviously, over the last few years. And I just think there's a doubt factor that keeps like just getting chiseled into our brain sometimes. And that's why I'm so passionate about that. I think we have so much potential, unlimited potential as human beings. And to have that sort of like sucked out of us slowly like a leaking tire, it bothers me. And like you're saying, man, to me, it's always like, we also have this, like, I think I can do that, but that isn't strong enough all the time. So when you do stuff like you did, you go out and you run up into the wind right away. Those are the kind of things that we need to do all the time. It's like doing hard things really restores our faith in ourselves and our ability and our belief system that we can do more of that. And just how do you keep that momentum? How do you keep that going? And those are the things, because the minute you kind of get lazy with them, you know what I mean? It'll slap you back. And then it's just digging out of a little hole again. It's not always a massive hole. It's just those little holes that intrigue me, because it's so easy to be like, well, I was going to run, but I got a call. And then I started having this text conversation. The next thing you know, it's an hour and a half later. You're just far enough removed from doing something that you were planning on doing that you can blow it off a little bit longer and stuff like that. And I think we all have that tendency, but when we fuel our minds with, kind of like doubtful conversations or negative things or whatever, it's easy to kind of curl into your shell. And, that was the other thing I learned about when I played team sports, because I had that in me even back then, before phones, I don't even think we had a TV back at college back then. And we'd have baseball practice and I'd be trying to like hide and take a nap and shit. And I remember one time these guys just came in and just like ripped me out of bed and said, get your dumb ass out of bed. And then, then everything changed. It was sort of like put me in a position of a competitive edge position, a challenging position. And suddenly, you got people around you, pulling you down the right track. And that's the challenge these days. Cause we were talking about it earlier, like more and more stuff is kind of going back into the house and back into the corner. You're working at your computer, and that just, it's just, for me, it continually just kind of sucks you back into a place that makes it just a little bit harder to get out there and go do something. And every single time you do, you feel better. But it's just that, I talk about transitions in triathlon. It's that transition in life. How do you get from in front of your computer, out of your recliner with the phone, out to the Del Boca Vista? That's the toughest transition there is sometimes. And as we talk about, just, the hardest part of running is putting on your shoes. And it's just that simple sometimes. But creating that, once you get those, isn't it weird though? Because sometimes you put your shoes on and you're like, I'm going to go get this. But 10 minutes earlier, you're like, I don't want to do this shit. And it's just so weird how if you're not paying attention, if you're not consciously thinking about what you want to do or your mission in life or your mission for the day, how easily it is for that to be just stripped away and put off till tomorrow. And I fall prey to it, man. And that's why I get so mad, because I told him I don't like phones. I know they're great on a lot of levels, but I don't like them just because they're so compelling. It's like I can't, it makes me mad because sometimes I just can't get away from it or whatever. And I hate that, but that's my problem. I got to figure out how to just kind of shut the switch off and go the next way. And I do it sometimes, and I'm sure everybody does this. Like sometimes they're just great at it, and other times they're very, very vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's no big deal, and that's when life is going good, and then it's real easy to be like, man, life's hard, and let's just sit here and curl up in our futon.
No, you bring up a great point, and honestly, as a coach, the most frustrated I see athletes is when they've gone through a period of not being motivated, not being energized, not being committed, not wanting to do nothing, right? Which is a symptom of being unhappy. Because if you're happy, no one's like, I'm really happy. I got tons of energy. You know what I want to do? I want to sit on my ass all day. Yeah. That's exactly what. No one does that, right? No. It's the best example I can give is like, when the sun, you're going through winter and like the last few years, the sun's out, everyone is in a better mood, period. And what are they doing? They're outside doing stuff. No one's like, man, it's gorgeous out today. You want to go in the basement and watch Netflix? Fuck no. I want to get outside and I want to move, right? But people get so down with, seasonal depression and all the darkness that we have in the winter, they don't do anything. And you know what? Doing nothing makes you want to do nothing. We're going back to the aggravated, frustrated athletes. They go through these periods, and then when they have the opportunity to do things, they just made the choice not to, or they chose not to address the reasons why, right? They didn't feel like they wanted to do anything. And we're waiting for, this magic day to happen where they're just going to have energy and feel better. I'm just going to sit on my butt today. I don't feel like doing anything. Maybe tomorrow. Sit in your butt again. Don't do nothing. Is when you get the spark, you choose to move, and then guess what? Life takes the opportunity away from you. You hurt yourself. You legit get sick. Stress at home. You're moving. Job, kids, whatever. They're so frustrated, and most of the time it's not, and I mention this because it's true. They're not frustrated with life. They're frustrated with themselves because we always think we have more time. We always think there's next year to train. We always think there's later on this year. We always think there's the next race. We always think there's next Monday. Well, that's fine. I got plenty of time. Says who? Last I checked, none of us were in charge, period. Mm-hmm. And then right when they make the decision to get it together, it's taken away. So they're not just frustrated with the circumstances. They're frustrated with their wasted time. You're frustrated by your wasted time and opportunity to do things to make yourself feel better. And now you don't have a choice. Now it's just, it's mitigating loss. And so you can't, we learn the most about ourselves when we challenge ourselves, when we do new things. We figure out what we like. We figure out what we don't like. We figure out what we're good at. We figure out what we're not good at. We gain confidence. All these things. We don't do that by doing nothing. We don't do it. But that's how we've become. It's like we, from a training standpoint, from a life standpoint, and I have before 2020, I was a very, I don't say rigid, but I was very in a protective state with most athletes, and like, don't do that. It's it's going to increase your risk. You're probably going to get hurt. It's all about longevity. And I've had to shift that. And while I still think that way, generally speaking, I've had to shift my, I've had to become more flexible. I've had to become more flexible
on the
fuck around and seeing what athletes need from an emotional and mental standpoint, that they need a risk. They need to take a chance on themselves. They need to dig deep, not to dig deep physically, but when you dig deep physically, you're digging deep emotionally, and you're finding out something about yourself that you didn't know, or you're figuring out things in life, right? You do those during challenging times. No one solves the world's problems on the trainer watching Netflix for an easy ride, right? You go bury yourself, or you go out for a long run. I've never had anybody cry on the trainer, ever. But I've had multiple athletes, I believe myself and yourself included, cry on a run or shed tears in a pool, because you take away life's distractions, right, from a phone or from whatever it is, and you get the opportunity to silence out the world and to go inside, which is a frightening place, mind you, for most people, is to sit alone with your own thoughts and feelings, and then let them bubble up to the surface. And instead of shoving them back down by picking up your phone and checking out the new Instagram post from some dude you don't even know, you think through them, and then you work through them. That's hard. That's a risk enough for most people, but they don't. So we find ways to stay fine, and that's a miserable way to live, right? Take chances, take risks, take losses. Taking a loss is better than not competing. Period. Take a loss. Learn. You have to be able to challenge yourself, and it's okay to not be good at things. It's okay to not have your best that day. None of us do. But the point is to get up and go do something about it, because because race day is the same. If you wake up on race and you don't feel that great, if you never work out when you don't feel great, then you're already done for the day.
Yep.
When you might feel better 6 hours from now, you have no idea. But you've got to train yourself in that mode of getting out there and getting into the ring and fight. Fight for yourself, period. And we just don't do that nearly as much anymore. We're afraid to fight for ourselves and what we want, or what we believe in, or how we want to be treated, or what we want out of training, and we just give in. And it's easier to give in than it is to, say no, or take time for yourselves, or push yourself on a run, or it's raining, so I, decided to skip. And what? No, go run. Like, it's no one's ever come back. Again, like going back to like the interesting things that athletes say. Every time an athlete runs in the rain, they come back like, God, that was the best. It was refreshing. It was like, it cleared my head. But on the other side, for every one of those are 20, they're like, yeah, it was a chance of rain today, so I went ahead and moved my run this morning.
Yeah.
And we miss the amount of opportunities we miss. It just continues to stack. And I don't want us to keep falling down that, going down that path is to take a risk and challenge yourself and be afraid, right? Is the other thing. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be scared. That's healthy. That is totally healthy. But when you feel those feelings, it's not okay to retreat and, like you said, curl up on the futon. It's a reason to maybe not attack, but to dive in and figure out why, and to go through it. Don't be scared and run. Be fearful and move forward. And that is something that we have lacked the last 5 years.
You said about the moving the run because of chance of rain. The first thing that came to my head is you can't outsmart the universe. And I think a lot of times, we think tech and advancement and all this kind of stuff are going to save us from any kind of pain, or we're going to sugarcoat our lives because we can figure everything out. We can order Uber Eats and we don't have to move. But that's not the solution. You said another thing that really resonated with me. It's like, we don't build confidence by doing nothing. And that is so massive. And I know I talk a lot about, my affinity for Zen behavior and just being calm and being in the moment and things like that. And I think, it gets, and I've always loved meditation, but I mean, the reality is nobody's ever meditated their way to a Kona championship. You know what I mean? You can sit and calm your thoughts. But I'm always wary of it because people are like, oh, you meditate? How do you meditate? And I'm just like, you just sit and you just kind of are in your space. But what happens is shit comes up. Like you said, if you do nothing, the more stuff comes up and you have to deal with it. But if you're out really creating your personal resume of life by doing things, that's the building of the confidence. So, but if you're in a bad space and you don't feel like working out or anything, I don't ever really advocate meditating because you're sitting with those thoughts that you don't like and they're going to be coming out like crazy. It's going to take you even deeper, so you're not ready for it. So yeah, man, you gotta move, you gotta go do stuff. And that's what really does build out those connective pieces. And, we talk always first person usually, and it's because we're in the same boat. We are not immune to these challenges, but I mean, that's one thing in my life it's been, you said that about be afraid. I mean, I feel like I've, been facing the clowns, which I am so afraid of clowns, but I like to.
Are you really? I don't think I knew that.
I've had nightmares, and I've written a poem about a clown once, and I did, and they just kept multiplying. But facing things like that, whether it's like I said, going on the baseball field every time, I was just like, I did not want to do it, but once you get it done, you're just you're building a little notch in your resume. And whatever it was, I started drumming. I was just like I was so afraid of that, but I just kept doing it. And because they're part, there's something to be said. What was the saying is like, if you're afraid of something, do it because that's what you want the most. And you're just, it scares you, but that's what you want and need the most. Whatever your fear is, go after it. And I think that's so true. You can kind of think about that on a daily basis. What's scaring you right now? That's the thing you need to go right into. And I think that's how you build confidence. I think that's how you build more and more success stories in your life. And then, you just got to, it's like racing too, races can scare a lot of people. I've never had real fear around a race. And I think it has to do with a lot of, it's something that I've faced a lot in my life, especially on the competitive level. I always kind of feel, and I've talked about it before, sometimes I'm nervous the day or two before, you just kind of, it's that premature optimization thing where you're trying to like work everything out, every mile of the run. How am I going to run this mile? And you start thinking all that stupid shit. And then when race day comes, it's just all gone. And I feel this wave of calm come over me every time because it's here. And you got to just do it. You can't turn back. At least I don't look at it that. I never look at it as like, okay, it's just that walk the plank moment. And I think there's something really beautiful about that when you have to face the music. You can be scared. Imagine giving a public speech, which most people are afraid of. And the months leading up to it, you're just shitting your pants every day because you just can't think how it's going to happen. And then you go there. And you do it, and it wasn't that bad. And I think that's the daily thing that we faced on a lower level, those subtle tensions that we face. And we just have to step through the threshold and go for
it. We'll leave this with maybe a little analogy, but
leave us with a fable.
Yeah, some people hate my analogies, but that's how we all learn. It's how we explain things. But
I'm not one of them.
When it comes to decisions, you always have to ask yourself why you're making it. And if you're making what you're going to gain versus what you could lose. Right. And then I'll ask yourself, well, if I'm trying to not lose, I'm already committed to gaining nothing. And why am I so afraid of what might happen? Right. So like, as a parent, you make tons of decisions about, your kids and what you let them do or not do, or what situation to put it in, or what situation not to put them in, or is it going to be too hard, or is it going to be too difficult? And, like with Hayden, he's the youngest kid. He's the youngest kid on our street. And there's like, how normal kids are. There's like, like three or four, like, fourth, fifth, sixth graders. And sometimes, as kids always are, they're just not nice, right? To the youngest kid. And to be fair, Hayden really doesn't put up with a lot of shit. So he, probably is not the favorite sometimes. But he, like a couple of weeks ago, he came back home and he was like, so-and-so was mean to me and, was saying things and came up. He was just genuinely upset, so you deal with that as a parent. You have a conversation like, oh, well, next time you don't like it, just leave, walk away. And of course, as most kids are, the next day he gets home from school and he's like, I'm going to go down I'm going to go down and play at so-and-so's house. And your first thought is no, because you just got upset yesterday. And when you're upset, I get upset as a parent. So the answer is no. Right. So every first thought in my head was no. And then the next thought was, tell him, we'll just come play inside or watch a show or do something. And then I thought to myself, he doesn't seem fazed. Why am I fazed? Let him go learn something. It might go bad. He'll learn a lesson, or it might not, and he'll have a good time. So I nervously, honestly, was like, all right, be back in an hour. And send him down to the same place that, he got his feelings hurt or whatever. The day he didn't come back for an hour, came back, and he comes back to the door. I'm like, all right, is he going to be crying? Is he going to be upset? Comes back. I'm like, hey man, what's going on? No, we played wiffle ball. I had like some good hits. I had the best time. And I was like, first off, I was like, phew. Saying that all to say, I took a risk, right? Not a huge risk, not this life altering risk, but the risk was, play it safe and get nothing out of it, or risk learning a lesson or taking a loss, which is fine because you learned something, or it ends up being a win. But no matter what, you get something out of it. And he got something, and so did I. I got something out of it. He got something out of it instead of doing nothing, which was, hey, why don't you go down the basement and watch Disney for an hour? You get nothing, right?
Right.
Because I think we. And every parent, will know exactly the feeling until you're trying to protect your kids, but you don't always have to do that. Like, kids are resilient. We adults aren't. Kids, you hear people say it all the time. Okay, well, kids are resilient. Yeah, it's because they haven't gotten soft yet. Adults, we're weak. We're just weak. But the point is even a loss is a gain. It's more of a gain than a nothing. And I just think that taking losses have become our way of protecting our own ego and our own sanity in certain ways, but it just makes us, it prevents us from learning. And I think it's just an important reminder it's better to take a loss than it is to not show up or not take a risk. And because that's how we learn. You might take a win, you might get wins, that's fine. But you're gonna learn from the losses. As every professional coach will tell you, they don't remember the wins, they remember all the hard losses because that's the ones that stick with them. They don't remember the days they did nothing. But yeah, that's all I got for today.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Don't let them steal your loosh out there.
Yeah. Or don't curl up on the futon.
Yeah. Fear is a compass. That's the line that I wanted to remember.
Yep. 100%.
I think that's just really powerful.
Like that.
I guess
it tells us about ourselves, but usually we just want to avoid it because we're really just not comfortable with what it's going to tell us.
I know, but it never goes away. That's the problem. If you don't face it, right? Yeah.
Just bubbles up in different areas of life or in training or in whatever it is.
Yeah. Maybe I should, maybe you and I should just get on a plane and fly around the country and just check out different cities.
Well, that's about time to wrap it up for today. As always, we appreciate you. We love you. Always, thanks for listening. If you're looking at ways to support the podcast or support Mike and I, go to the website, c26triathlon.com. It is our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. You can click on the online store and purchase some swag. Get some gear for yourself. That's the best way to support the podcast and show your appreciation and get some cool swag in return. And you can always go to iTunes or your favorite podcast platform and give us a solid review. If you need more info on coaching, that's there as well under the coaching tab. And Mike is available. He's at CrushingIron@gmail.com. Or if you need anything from me specifically, I'm at c26coach@gmail.com.
All right, buddy. Good talking to you.
You too, man.
See you
on Friday.
All right.